Welcome to today's Community Cast. My name is Matt Morgan. I'm the pastor at Community Brookside, a new church plant in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We are so blessed by your presence, and we hope that today's content will bring you joy.
So, y'all don't know me, but I used to be an English teacher a long time ago, very briefly, because then I went right to seminary. But I love children's books. And so when I heard that you guys were going to be doing a back to school drive, I thought, what if I did a sermon on one of my favorite Dr. Seuss books? So it's kind of a mini series today. I love the Lorax. And I want to ask, this is a very important question. When is the last time you read the Lorax? Someone said, oof. It's been a long time. Yeah, everybody? A long time since you read it. Well, for me, it's probably really only been like a few days because I'm a mom of two little boys who love books and they are in their Dr. Seuss era. But if it's been a while, let me tell you, it is worth reading it again with adult eyes. The story may have impacted you as a child. You felt very bad for, the Lorax and the truffula trees, etc. But it hits home in a new way today. Sometimes I think it's worth reading children's books again because we have a tendency as adults to make things more complicated than they actually are. And sometimes reading a children's book can convey a simple truth that we may have forgotten as we have aged. Not that anyone here has aged. You all look very young, very young. So let's take a walk down Storybook Lane. The story of the Lorax opens on a dark night with a young boy walking from his home on the edge of a dilapidated town towards the street of the lifted Lorax. The town is desolate, it's smoggy, it is devoid of wildlife, and the boy is curious about who or what the Lorax was and why the town is so run down. And he approaches the one person who can tell him more, the Onceler. The Onceler is a strange, reclusive inventor who lives above his clothing shop and on certain occasions, and for a particular price, he will tell his story. Way back when the Onceler arrived in this area, it wasn't bleak and desolate. It was a vibrant place filled with colorful, fluffy truffula trees and wonderful creatures like humming fish and brown barbaloots. But of all the magical, curious oddities, the Onceler is particularly thrilled with the truffula trees. He says, but the trees, those truffula trees, all my life I'd been searching for trees such as these. The touch of their tufts was so much softer than silk, but they had the sweet smells of fresh buttery milk. So he unloads his carts and he sets up shop and he cuts down a truffula tree with one chop. And he invents a new product, a thneed. But chopping down the truffula tree also brings forth an adversary. And we know who that is. It's the Lorax. He pops out of a stump and he declares, I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongues. And he chastises the Onceler, warning him that his actions will have consequences. But the Onceler waves him off and justifies his action, saying that the thneed is quite useful, and after all, it's only one tree. When the Lorax lays eyes on the thneed, he says, Sir, you are crazy with greed. There is no one on earth who would buy that fool thneed. But if you've read the story, you know that there are many on earth who would buy that fool thneed. So the Onceler doesn't listen to the Lorax's pleas. As his small shop flourishes into a booming factory, the landscape begins to change. To make more thneeds, the Onceler needs more truffula trees, so the trees begin to disappear rapidly. The factory pollutes the air and the water, and his greed begins to take a toll on the environment. And the Onceler, of course, says he didn't really mean any harm. He says, I most surely did not, but I had to grow bigger, so bigger I got. I went right on biggering, selling more needs, and I biggered my money, which everyone needs. With no trees, the brown barbaloots have nothing to eat. The swami swans can no longer sing, and the humming fish can't hum when their gills are all gummed. So one by one, the Lorax sends them away where they might find a better place to stay. At play here in the Lorax is what I would call two competing theologies. A theology of dominance versus a theology of dominion. And you might think that those two words mean the same thing, but you would be wrong. In Genesis 1:20 through 31, that's where we get the concept of dominion over the earth, and it comes from what is traditionally read as God giving us, humanity, the right to subdue and use creation as we see fit. But as is also often true, sometimes misunderstanding even one word in a passage can change our interpretation entirely. The common understanding of human beings having dominion over creation has led to the exploitation and abuse of the environment. We view it as ours, so we can do whatever we want with it, right? But a closer study of that word, dominion, as it appears in Genesis, reveals that it must be understood in terms of caregiving, even nurturing, not dominating. So I want you to think of it this way. I have a dog named Gimli. Is anybody a Lord of the Rings fan? Not a single Lord of the Rings fan in the house? That is crazy to me. Okay, Gimli's, one. God bless you, sir. In the Lord of the Rings, Gimli is a dwarf, and I have a little dog that looks very tough, but he's tiny. So, when I go out of town, I have a friend, her name's Patricia, and she takes care of him for me. Now, imagine if I returned home to find that she had hurt him, or that she had not given him food or water, or something worse. She would have failed in her job as caregiver. It's the same with creation. We don't own creation. It belongs to God. We have been charged with its care. We are to be stewards of the earth, not abusers of the earth. This is exactly where the Onceler gets it wrong. He has confused dominance with dominion. He sees the truffula trees and this beautiful place and all that it inhabits as something he can use and abuse without consequence. But as he discovers the hard way, the earth does not have endless resources. Towards the end of the book, the Onceler finally tires of the Lorax's warnings and pleas. He says, and then I got terribly mad. I yelled at the Lorax, now listen here, Dad. All you do is yap, yap and say, bad, 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 bad. Well, I have my rights, sir, and I'm telling you, I intend going on doing just what I do. And I honestly believe that the Onceler hears the Lorax and even sees that what he says is true. But he ignores it or perhaps denies it because it's an inconvenient truth. I know that sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? And in the end, the plight of the brown barbaloots and the swami swans and the humming fish, it doesn't affect him. He only cares about himself. And then the story comes to its inevitable conclusion. And at that very moment, we heard a loud whack. From outside in the trees came a sickening smack of an axe on a tree. Then we heard the tree fall, the very last truffula tree of them all. This is what happens when we confuse dominance with dominion. We forget our responsibility to care for creation, prizing our own greed and convenience over all else. It does not take a genius to look around and conclude that we, like the Onceler, have fundamentally misunderstood our role as human beings on this earth. We have not been stewards or caretakers of the earth as the Lord our God commanded. We have been its wanton abuser. We have taken and taken and taken and never thinking of the consequences. But here's another important question for you. When's the last time you talked to a college student? A 20-something? Recently? Yeah? And I don't mean just like, hey, what classes are you taking? Wow, English is a terrible major. You'll never be able to do anything with that. That's what people told me. Still have a job. I don't mean, run-of-the-mill questions. I mean like a real conversation about something that they care deeply about. If it's been a while, I encourage you to come hang out at the Weasley. Really eye-opening. College students are not so far removed from childhood that they have forgotten the Lorax's warnings. And this generation of students have, as they've transitioned into adulthood, they understand the seriousness of what we face in terms of climate change in a way that most of us don't, and don't really have to think about. But if we paused long enough to listen, we would see that this next generation of young adults understands the proper relationship between human beings and creation. And it's not dominance, it's dominion. They see that for too long, the term dominion we find in Genesis 1 has been misinterpreted to our collective detriment. But it's their generation who will pay for it. In 2021, the Lorax celebrated its 50th anniversary, and the same week, I don't know if this is tragic or just ironic, the United Nations came out with an urgent report on the dire consequences of human-induced climate change. Does anybody remember this? I know, we've been through like a whole pandemic, so it's like kind of hard to remember any details anymore. Climate scientists warned that the world needs to limit its warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit for us who are from the United States. Beyond that threshold, sea levels would rise and threaten to flood coastal cities. Coral reefs could disappear almost entirely, and extreme weather events would become even more common. Not that we need more tornadoes, but that's kind of the thing. Currently, the world is on track for around 2.5 degrees Celsius of warming. And so the simple truth is that we are just not doing enough to address this crisis, and it is a threat to us all. But it is especially a threat to this generation of adults and our children and grandchildren. The Lorax sounded the alarm 50 years ago, but we have not listened. But our story does not have to end like the Onceler. We have agency. God has not left us helpless. We don't have to throw in the towel or, throw out all of our trash. Despite what we might believe, we can do something about this. God has made us partners in the redemption of creation and longs for us to assume our roles as caretakers of creation. We have the power to bring relief to the suffering. We can unshackle creation from the oppression of our greed and abuse if we're willing to change. And that's tough. But the Lorax concludes with a seed of hope, a literal seed of hope. One seed. The Onceler has saved one precious truffula tree seed for all these years, and he has waited for someone who cared to come along. Now, look, I don't pretend to know all the answers about addressing climate change. I'm just a simple pastor from Oklahoma. It will take each and every one of us doing our part to reverse what is coming, or really what is already happening to our planet. But the one thing we can do is invest in a generation that will face this crisis head on. And we can't do that unless we listen to them and provide spaces where they can be encouraged and challenged to change the world, places like the Wesley Foundation. We can give this generation the seeds of hope to change the course of our planet. We have a responsibility, a command to care for all of creation, and that includes the people of this earth. And as the Lorax once said, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's Community Cast. We hope that you were blessed by today's conversation. If you'd like to know more about Community Brookside, please feel free to visit us at our website, communitybrookside.com, or find us on your favorite social media outlet. We hope to hear from you soon. Be blessed.